Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Mr. Siam and everyone. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my research proposal. My name is Syafaat Apgrey with student ID A1M223071 from the English Education Department, Faculty of Teacher, Training and Education, Hauloleo University. The title of my research proposal is The Effect of Using Wordwall on Students' Vocabulary Mastery at the 8th grade of SMP Negeri 1 Klisusu. In this presentation, I will explain two main parts of my proposal, namely the introduction and the research and methodology. Now, let's move to the first chapter, which is the introduction. Now, background of the study. Vocabulary is one of the most important aspects of learning English because it supports all four language skills, namely listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Without sufficient vocabulary, students will have difficult understanding text, expressing ideas, and communicating effectively. However, in many Indonesian junior high school, including SMP Negeri 1 Klisusu, vocabulary is still commonly taught through traditional methods such as translation and memorization. Although these methods help students remember some words, they often make students feel bored and less motivated to learn. Based on my classroom observation, many students still have limited vocabulary mastery. They often forget new words easily, have difficulty using vocabulary correctly, and tend to be passive during English lessons. Therefore, teachers need a more interactive learning medium that can make students actively participate in the learning process. One of the digital learning media that can be used is Wordwall. Wordwall provides various educational games such as quizzes, matching activities, and word searches that make learning vocabulary more interesting and enjoyable. Therefore, I am interested in investigating whether the use of Wordwall can significantly improve students' vocabulary mastery compared to conventional teaching method. So, chapter 1, problem identification, limitation, and research question. Based on the background, I identify three main problems. First, students have low vocabulary mastery, especially in recalling and using English words correctly. Second, many students have low motivation and participate passively during English lessons. Third, teachers rarely use digital game-based learning media such as Wordwall in vocabulary instruction. To make this research more focused, I limit the study to 8th grade students at SMP Negeri 1 Kulisusu. So the research only focuses on vocabulary found in descriptive and recount text. In addition, the Wordwall activities used in the study include matching pairs, quizzes, and word search games. Based on this limitation, the research question is in my proposal is there a significant effect of using Wordwall compared to conventional teaching on the English vocabulary mastery of 8th grade students at SMP Negeri 1 Kulisusu? These questions becomes the main focus of my research proposal. So, research objective and significance. The objective of this research is to investigate and analyze whether the use of Wordwall is more effective than conventional teaching in improving the English vocabulary mastery of 8th grade students at SMP Negeri 1 Kulisusu. So, this research is expected to provide both theoretical and practical contribution. Theoretically, the study is expected to enrich the literature on English language teaching, especially in the area of digital game-based vocabulary learning. Practically, this research is expected to benefit several parties. For teachers, it can provide an alternative teaching medium that is more interactive and engaging. For students, Wordwall is expected to improve their motivation, classroom participation, and vocabulary mastery. Finally, for the school, this research may serve as a reference for integrating more digital learning media into English instruction. That is the explanation of chapter 1. Next, I will continue with explain chapter 3, which explain the research methodology. Now, I would like to continue with chapter 3, which explain the research methodology of the study. This chapter describes how the research will be conducted, including the research design, participants, research instruments, data collection procedures, and data analysis techniques. This study uses a quantitative research approach because the data will be collected in the form of numerical scores and analyzed statistically to determine whether there is a significant effect of using Wordwall on students' vocabulary mastery. Specifically, this research applies a quasi-experimental design, since the participants are selected from existing classes rather than being randomly assigned into groups. The research employs a non-equivalent control group design, which involves two groups, an experimental group and a control group. As shown in the table, both groups will take a pretest before the treatment begins. The purpose of the Pretest is to measure the student's initial vocabulary mastery and to ensure that both groups have relatively similar abilities before the experiment. So, after the pretest, the experimental group will receive vocabulary instruction using Wordwall, while the control group will be taught using conventional teaching methods. Finally, both groups will take a post-test to measure their vocabulary achievement after the treatment. By comparing the post-test result of the two groups, I will be able to determine whether Wordwall has a significant effect on students' vocabulary mastery. In this study, the independent variable is the use of Wordwall, while the dependent variable is students' English vocabulary mastery. Next, the next aspect of the methodology is the research participants. The population of this study consists of all grad students at SMP Negeri 1 Kalisoso. These students are chosen because they follow the same curriculum, study in a similar learning environment, and are generally between 13 and 14 years old. Therefore, they provide an appropriate population for the study. From this population, I will select two intake classes as the research sample. One class will serve as the experimental group, and while the other class will become the control group. Each class is expected to consist of 20 to 13 students, depending on the actual class size at the school. In selecting the sample, I will primarily use purposive sampling. This means that the classes are selected based on several considerations, such as similar pretest results, the same English teacher, and relate similar class size. However, if more than two classes meet these criteria, cluster random sampling may be used to randomly determine which classes will become the experimental and control group. By employing these sampling techniques, I expect both groups to be as comparable as possible before the treatment begins. The next component of this research is research instrument and the data collection procedure. To measure students' vocabulary mastery, I will use a vocabulary mastery test consisting of 14 questions. The test includes 25 multiple choice questions which contribute 16 points and 15 matching questions. So, before the test is admire the instrument will to undergo validity and reliability testing to ensure that is accurately measure students' vocabulary mastery. For validity, the instrument will be evaluated by expert through content validity ratio or CVR and supported by item analysis. Meanwhile, reliability will be measured using the KR20 formula for the multiple choice section, while the matching section will be evaluated through inter-rater agreement. Regarding the data collection procedure, the research will be conducted in 3 stages. So the first stage is pre-test. Both groups will take the same standardized test within approximately 16 minutes to determine their initial vocabulary level. The second stage is the treatment. The experimental group will learn vocabulary through Wordwall activities, while the control group will continue learning through conventional teaching methods. The treatment will be conducted over four meetings within 1 month, with each meeting lasting 18 minutes. And finally, the third stage is post-test, which will be administered under the same standardized condition as the pre-test. So the post-test results will then be used to compare the vocabulary achievement of the two groups after the treatment. After collecting all the data, the next step is data analysis. The data analysis process consists of 3 main stages. The first stage is descriptive statistics. At this stage, I will calculate the mean score, standard deviation, minimum score, maximum score, and score range for both the pre-test and post-test result of the experimental and control groups. This descriptive statistic provide an overall picture of students' vocabulary performance before and after the treatment. The second stage is the prerequisite test. Before conducting the hypothesis test, it is important to ensure that the data meet the required statistical assumption. Therefore, I will conduct a normality test using the Shapiro-Milk test or the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test if necessary. In addition, I will perform Levine test to examine whether the variance of the two groups are homogeneous. And finally, the third stage is hypothesis testing to determine whether there is a significant difference between the experimental and control groups. I will use an independent sample t-test. If the significant value or p-value, the null hypothesis will be rejected, indicating that Wordwall has statistically significant effect on student vocabulary mastery. Besides statistical significance, I will also calculate coherence to measure the effect size. This analysis helps explain not only whether Wordwall is effective, but also how strong its effect in improving student vocabulary mastery. That concludes the explanation of my research methodology in chapter 1 and chapter 3. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to answer any question. So, That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.